You're thinking about it? All right, well, welcome to the Tri-County Planning Body meeting, November 8th. Folks figured out we're meeting at 3:30, not 4, so we have a little extra time. We have a pretty packed agenda today. So we'll do some introductions, and then we'll work through what we're hoping to achieve and really dive in. As I said, we have a lot to cover. So if it's all right, what I'll do is I'll just start on the screen. If you could introduce yourself, we'll just kind of mix members. Please identify yourself, and then staff as well. So I think first one on the screen, it's not in the room, is Zoe.
Hello, my name is Zoe Lacopiano, and I am the Housing and Stability Director at Community Action in Washington County.
Thank you. Christina?
Christina Palacios, she, her pronouns, and I'm a Housing Oregon Membership Relation and Industry Support.
Thank you. Mindy?
Hey there, Mindy Statlander, use she, her pronouns, and I'm the CEO of HealthShare.
Jesse?
Hi, everybody. Jesse Adams, she, her pronouns. I am on the Strategic Initiatives team at Washington County.
Thank you. Adam?
Good afternoon, everybody. Adam Brown here, he, him pronouns. I'm the Deputy Director at Clackamas County's Health, Housing, and Human Services.
Vahid?
Good afternoon, Vahid Brown, he, him pronouns, Deputy Director of Housing and Community Development at Clackamas County.
Thank you. Brianna?
Hi folks, Brianna Flores, she, they pronouns, SHS Program Supervisor with Multnomah County.
Thank you. Kanoi?
Afternoon, everyone. Kanoi Eggleston, she, her pronouns, Program Director at the Joint Office in Multnomah County.
Thank you. Chair Smith?
Hello, Tootie Smith, Chair, Clackamas County Board of Commissioners.
Thanks, Chair. Let's see. Oh, yeah, Michael Liu. Let's start. Thank you, Chair.
Hi, Mike Liu, he, him pronouns with Fubon Shopping Center, and I'm going to have to cut out of the meeting a little early today, a little after 5.
Good, thank you. Anybody else online that I missed? I think we got everyone. Let's go into the room. Malia, let's start with you in the back.
Malia Dieter, she, her pronouns, Metro Housing Department.
Thank you. Abby?
Abby Ahern, she, her, Metro Housing.
Chair?
Hi there, Catherine Harrington, elected Chair of the Washington County Board of Commissioners, Washington County.
Thank you. Mercedes?
Hello, Mercedes Lizalde, she and her pronouns, Director of Advocacy at Latino Network.
Yeah.
Giovanni Bautista, Metro Housing Department, he, him, his pronouns.
Nicole?
Hello, Nicole Larson, she, her pronouns. I am City Liaison for Imago Dei Community and a licensed clinical social worker.
Ebony Brown, she, her pronouns, the Executive Director of Greater Good Northwest.
Ben Duncan, Kearns and West, Facilitator. Matt?
Matt Chapman, he, his, and co-chair.
Steve?
Steve Rudman, he, him, a member.
Ariella?
Hi, Ariella Dolan with Kearns and West.
Yes.
Afternoon, Jess Larson, she and her pronouns with Washington County.
Patricia?
Good afternoon, Patricia Rojas, she and her pronouns, Housing Director for Metro.
Liam?
Liam Frost, he, him, his, Metro Housing Department.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis, when you sit down, introduce yourself, please. Okay, did we miss anybody? I think I see all the people here. Nobody's joined since. Okay, well, let's I'll review kind of what we're hoping to achieve. We have several really important items on our agenda today. I'll just make a note that we've edited the agenda to move the Regional Investment Fund, the RIF discussion first. I know we pushed it out from our last meeting. Want to make sure we have time for that discussion. It's certainly an opportunity for us to learn more about the RIF and connection to y'all's role as Tri-County Planning Body. And then we're going to move into a critical part of our conversation around landlord recruitment. And I really just express my appreciation for Metro, you all, for sharing and the timeline that went out to members, really reminding us and demonstrating that today is a result of a lot of work that you all did to identify all the goal areas, this being one of them, which really initiated the action step to bring in a consultant to provide the analysis of opportunities for regional approaches to advance landlord recruitment. So you're going to hear results of that work, and we'll build in time for discussion, Q&A, and really seeking clarity on what was included in the memo that you all received. And then we'll also be seeking your collective alignment per your authority as a Tri-County planning body on the concepts that you'd like your county partners to come back to you all in service of informing what will ultimately be part of our regional plan. It's my hope that we'll close our conversation coming to some clarity, some agreement, and some alignment on how we're going to move forward in next steps. Any questions on our agenda today? Co-chairs, anything you'd like to offer at the start?
Nope.
Okay. So I do want to pass it to co-chairs though to approve our October meeting summary.
Motion to approve October minutes summary?
Second.
We got a motion by Chair Ebony Brown, co-chair Matt Chapman, seconds. All those in favor of approving the October meeting summary? Say aye, raise your hand. I see some hands raised. Mindy, did you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, sorry. Your face popped up and I don't remember. I know I saw you earlier and then I didn't see you and now I saw you again, so thank you. All right, so meeting summary approved. Thank you all. So we have some space for public comment, then we'll move into our staff updates. So the public comment period, if you're in the audience, if you can raise your hand, this is a chance that we provide at every meeting to provide verbal comment. Malia, we didn't receive any written comment for this meeting, correct? Okay. So if you're in the public, would like to offer public input at this period of time, you can raise your hand. I don't see anybody on the phone. I'm mostly seeing staff. So maybe last call for public comment. And then the only thing I'd add, Malia, could we promote Yesenia? Yesenia, I'm going to put you on the spot as part of our introductions to welcome you and to give you an opportunity to say hello to everybody. There you are. So if you could introduce yourself, welcome to the space and talk a little bit about your role.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Yesenia Delgado. I use she and her pronouns, and I am the new Supportive Housing Services Manager at Metro. I am filling the big shoes that Nui Bazaar currently held. So part of my role is coming in and providing support internally and also externally to all the counties to continue to operationalize and hold the vision and the work that the measure tasks us with. So I know that there's a lot of familiar faces in the room. I know a lot of you all, so I'm just excited to continue to do the good work and work really closely with the TCPB kind of committee and the different tasks groups that are being formed to continue to fulfill the measure and all the incredible work that comes with it. So thank you, Ben, for allowing me to do a quick intro.
Okay, look forward to working together. Thanks, Yesenia. Abby, can I pass it to you for staff updates?
Yes, you may. All right. So as usual, we are giving you all just a brief update on all the 6 TCPB goals. Just this was part of your meeting packet, just making sure that we keep you up to date. So obviously, unit landlord recruitment, we'll be talking a lot about today. For coordinated entry, Metro's consultant Homebase has conducted interviews and continues to conduct interviews with key stakeholders. We'll have our first monthly coordinated entry regional work group meeting on November 13th, which is Monday. For healthcare system alignment, there's continuing development of recommendations for operationalizing the Medicaid waiver. And there's more conversation and some work being done about approaching other opportunities for regional cross-system health and housing coordination. And then for training and technical assistance, Metro continues to staff up the regional capacity team with a manager in the process of being hired, and building out a series of we're working towards building out a series of regional capacity programs. And then first on the list is requests for a regional request for qualifications for technical assistance for providers that could be helpful across the region to counties as well. And then finally, living wage. Homebase is also our consultant on that. They're conducting a scan of local and national service providers, doing interviews with local service providers, and the first of 3 stakeholder meetings will happen on November 9th.
There's one more thing, isn't there? So we had a commissioner who's no longer a commissioner.
I'd like to jump in on that
Yeah,
one, Ben, if
please,
that's all right.
Liam.
First of all, I want to thank everybody for showing up an extra 30 minutes early. This is pretty impressive. So thank you for doing that. It just reflects your commitment to the work of the TCPB. So thank you. And in the vein of gratitude and appreciation, even in absentia, thank you to Commissioner Jayapal for her participation, her contributions to this, and also having worked with her previously, her consistent advocacy for tenants and low-income folks and people experiencing housing instability and homelessness. She's been a tireless advocate, and we'll miss her, but she is being replaced by Chair Jessica Vega-Peterson of Multnomah County, so we'll have a full trio of chairs joining us for this committee. She will also be participating on the SHS Oversight Committee too. Yeah. Oh, and we also have Susan Emmons in the room, everybody, who is the co-chair of the Oversight Committee as well, taking notes today. I also wanted to add one other thing, if that's okay, Ben. Just an update on a big milestone in the Metro bond. The Metro bond, affordable housing bond, passed in 2018. And it's a big shout out to Clackamas County, Happy Valley, Catholic Charities, and Caritas Housing, who opened the Good Shepherd Village this past week. I think it was on Monday. It's a 143 unit apartment building. There will be some SHS funds going into that for supports and some rent subsidies, but that's a huge milestone in this progress of the bond across the region. And it just so happened to be the project was in Clackamas, but congratulations to you all for contributing that milestone, as well as to Washington County. Speaking of Washington County.
I must not be listening well enough. What was the milestone Metro achieved?
Well, I was going to get to that, Patricia.
Oh,
it was the
you're bearing the lead.
It was the 1,000th housing unit funded by the Metro Housing Bond.
Oh.
Yeah, or home, as we like to say, actually.
Yes.
So,
Congrats, Metro.
thanks for the push, Chair Harrington.
Bury the lead. Yeah, that's right. Any questions or reflections? Jess, jump in.
Is this time for more updates? Or not?
Yes,
Sure, we're
I
in
was
the
about to
updates.
hand it over
We're
to
in the
counties for
up-
updates.
Yeah, we're in the update phase.
That's exciting. And tomorrow we'll be opening more affordable housing bond built homes
Wow.
at the alongside in Tigard. So more great housing coming online. Some updates from Washington County. Oh, I'm so sorry, folks at home. I was just mentioning how also celebrating the new bond-built homes in Clackamas. We have the Alongside, which will be opening tomorrow, a grand opening celebration in Tigard, another bond-built building for seniors that we're excited to celebrate. And maybe we'll see some of you there also. Kicking off some updates from county partners. I'd like to introduce Nicole Sting, who's with us in the room. She's joined the Washington County team, leading up our strategic initiatives and relations, or the SIR team. So she'll be working with Jesse and I to support all of the work here at the TCPB and other partnerships with Metro and other great work. Some of that great work including our new launch of a coordinated advisory system overseeing our homeless services in Washington County. We are actively recruiting for folks to join this important community-led advisory body work. And the links are live if you are interested. We've folded our COC advisory body work and our HPAC Homeless Plan Advisory Committee and other spaces all into one unified advisory committee. And we're seeking 9 to 15 members to help launch that new body of work called the Homeless Solutions Advisory Council. So look for that online if you're interested in applying, or reach out to Nicole, Jesse, or I for more information. I think those are open through the recruitment's open through the middle of the month. We got some great fun press with our partners, Virginia Garcia, this week. If you saw it in the pamphlet, we are opening the grand opening of recuperative care program in one of our bridge shelters. It's the conclusion of pandemic era COVID beds and the launch of now integrated shelter programming with medical on-site services provided by Virginia Garcia. And I just want to give a shout out to you, Mindy, and your wonderful team at HealthShare, who's been helping coach us in all of our health and housing integration work. That's one of the many projects, and we're excited to see this come into fruition along with many others.
Thanks, Jess. So, Vahid, I'll come to you in a second. Sahan, do you want to say hello? Welcome.
Hello and welcome.
Sahan
Sahan McKelvey, he, him pronouns. Happy to be here with everybody else.
Always a pleasure. Vahid, do you want to go next?
Sure, thanks, Ben. And you stole my thunder. Part of the Clackamas County update was going to be the grand opening of the Good Shepherd Village. Metro did a great write-up of that project in their website. I just posted a link in the chat. 1,000th home of the bond, 58 new units of permanent supportive housing, one of the largest affordable housing developments in Clackamas County. So I'll just celebrate it some more, but thanks for lifting it up, Ben, Liam. I also want, we can all celebrate it. It's good news. It's good news for the community. We also welcomed last week our new staff leading our health and housing systems integration team. Acacia McGuire Anderson is coming to Clackamas County to help us stitch these systems together and meet the whole needs of the whole person across our systems as we work to end homelessness and ensure people's health and well-being. Acacia's amazing and brings a lot of experience in implementing Medicaid waivers at the state as the interim deputy director at the Oregon Department of Human Services, leading a successful implementation of a transition from sheltered workshops to employment first for people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. So that's an exciting step forward for Clackamas County and moving forward one of the TCPP's goals on health and housing integration. I'll turn it over to Brianna or Kanoy or both.
Yeah, Brianna, Kanoy, just really quickly so Malia doesn't have to yell at anybody anymore through chat. Please change your settings to everyone if you're going to use chat. Thank you.
Ben, would you mind if I added one update from Clackamas County as well? So
yeah,
week before last, Clackamas County issued a $10 million grant award to the Homeless Solutions Coalition of Clackamas County to build a resource center in downtown Oregon City. And this was kind of a remarkable effort to move quickly on staff's part here at the county, because the Homeless Solutions had a purchase option on the property that was set to expire just 10 business days after we had issued the award. And so we moved really quickly. They needed our funds, cash in hand, to close on the property. So we worked really quick to issue the grant award, got them the funding that they needed. And now they're off and running with the acquisition of this 40,000 square foot property right in downtown Oregon City.
that's awesome. Don't let anybody tell you government can't move fast, right, Adam? Patricia, you want to jump in before we go to Multnomah?
Quick shout out of thank you to all 3 counties who recently produced their annual reports and just presented those at the Oversight Committee. Wanted to let you know that those are available on the Metro website. I believe they're also available on the county websites, but really remarkable work. It was so wonderful to hear the stories, and just really a moment just to pause to recognize that despite the many challenges, there is amazing work happening transforming people's lives. So thank you, counties, for the lift, and I know creating those reports and doing the work every day.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia. They're not short, but it's worth the read, so I encourage folks to go in. Kanoi or Brianna?
Yeah, hi folks, and thank you for that segue, Patricia. We're actually going to talk about the annual report a little bit. So as Patricia mentioned, we had the opportunity to share out our report on Monday with the Oversight Committee. And so this was a huge lift, as many as folks know in the room and on the call. It's been a year with challenges, but also great successes. So it's great to hear what's going on in the other counties as well. And this big body of work just moving forward and gaining momentum. So that's great. I just want to take the moment to share some of the highlights that I shared in the Oversight Committee on Monday, specifically related to Multnomah County's annual report. So the key overall highlights of that report, and again, I encourage you to go in and read it. It is looking very long. It does look long for Multnomah County's report specifically. We approached it a little bit differently this year. So where it looks like there's about over 100 pages, there's actually about 40 pages of content. And the reason being is we wanted to make sure that we had a readable font. So everything in a 14-point font, and so it can be more accessible. And anyway, so going back to the highlights for Multnomah County specifically, one, we really wanted to highlight that folks are remaining in SHS funded housing. So for PSH, we are seeing a 99% retention rate. And for rapid rehousing, we're seeing an 84% retention rate. Eviction prevention goals were exceeded. So folks are being prevented from going homeless in the first place. And then in Multnomah County, we served a total of 6,698 people throughout the fiscal year. We exceeded our goals of sustaining and creating shelter beds. So we're stabilizing and helping stabilize that system with these funds. And for Multnomah County, 80% of the folks who received SHS funded services across all service types were identified as BIPOC. So lots of good work happening. And I just want to take a moment to congratulate our other county partners and colleagues here, because it's been a big lift, and I appreciate the equal buy-in from everybody who's here today, Metro, counties, and the folks that are doing the work on the ground. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Brianna. Kanoi, anything to add?
Sorry, you all, I don't have anything to add. I have some wonderful guests with me here today, my little children, so apologies, and nothing to add.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Sorry, Christina, you want to jump back in? That was Christina, right?
Sorry, I was supposed to have my speaker off and I
She
had
was
it on.
on mute. Okay. Great. Well, thank you for those updates. Any questions? Yeah, Chair?
I don't have a question. Rather, I know I'm not the only Oversight Committee member here today, but I wanted to share the comment that while I haven't had the opportunity to read every sentence and word of these reports, I at a minimum read the executive summaries and did a quick scan. And what it seems extraordinary to me that just in year 2, there are such incredible results in all 3 counties. So way to go, team. You're doing marvelously. And I know more exciting results are to come. We've been saying it, but I want to make sure you internalize you've been doing incredibly hard work, transforming lives. And I know I join an army of people throughout this region who are grateful for everything staff in our jurisdictions are doing, as well as in our community-based organizations and partners are doing in this work. So just terrific results. And I look forward to the Metro formal report for year 2. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chair. Any last thoughts, reflections, comments, questions? Okay, well, let's move into the RIF conversations. So Liam, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Ben. So to ground us where we're at right now, this is a continuation of a briefing that we began 2 months ago that we were intending to complete last month, but the conversation became so riveting that we weren't able to get to it. So I just want to thank some folks for suggesting that we hit this first today so we don't run out of time. I don't think we will, but I'm glad that we're starting with it today. And we're going to continue in the same vein, which is to onboard you all while we also do. So we want you to become accustomed with your responsibility around the RIF. And the last briefing that we provided you, we grounded you in the guiding documents, what authority you have, what authority you don't have, as prescribed by the ballot measure, the intergovernmental agreements, and so on. And today we're going to be sharing with you some numbers. We're also going to hear from
recording in progress.
Thank you very much. We're also going to be hearing from the counties about how some of that work that Chair Harrington was just referring to is being built up and prioritized in the first 2 years, and how that then fits into the future and what it looks like for you and your role. So before we go to the first slide, I just want to address folks who reviewed the slides in advance of this meeting. You will note that it included all the previous slides. So if you wanted to refer back to a document about the RIF in the future, it's all contained in what we sent to you in the meeting packet. But we're not going to go over those previous slides today. We want to really focus on what we want to brief you on today. So this first slide that we're going to touch on is just going to place the point in the process where you get to tackle with the RIF. It's not right now. It is when the counties return with, I don't want to use the word implementation plan anymore, but we're going to have to think of a different word because it's confusing. But an implementation plan associated with the goals. So the counties will come back with a proposal that will have a policy or program description, a timeline, metrics, and a budget. Now, if the budget is including the RIF, you all will get to weigh in on that. And that's why, I'm not sure if you can see the words up here that are really small, but the penultimate arrow there, the one that's in yellow, says TCPB reviews draft implementation plan for approval. That's when the conversation really comes up for you all around the RIF and that budget for that program. And that's when you'll be able to tackle that with county staff and with Metro staff when it comes around. And actually, we're not too far away, but we'll get to that in the second item on the agenda today. Next slide, please, Joe. Thank you.
Chair Harrington, did you want to jump in?
It's hard to see if the light's on. I just had a question on that previous slide. In the box that says, the one before the yellow one, counties create a draft implementation plan.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that counties and Metro together?
It certainly can be.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to check because we're all in this together.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. Appreciate it. All right, Joe. So as I mentioned, we're not going to belabor all the relevant documentation and provisions in the guiding documents, but we summarized here probably the two main categories that we want you to take away with. If we had to, we would encourage you all to read all the documents, but if we had to, and I'll just read it out loud. The counties must contribute at least 5% of their SHS allocation of program funds towards the Regional Strategy Implementation Fund, otherwise known as the RIF. And the TCPB is required to approve and monitor county expenditures after the TCPB has developed goals and provided the counties with a plan detailing those goals. Now, before we move on to the next slide, I want to focus on that first bullet point. So at least 5% of counties' SHS allocation of program funds. So it's not 5% off the top, it's 5% of what counties receive. And most importantly, counties keep that money at each of the counties until such time there is a budget that's been approved by the TCPB and the Oversight Committee to spend that. That's when it becomes activated, as it were. It's the best way I can describe it. But Metro does not have that fund. I want folks to understand that right now. We do not hold the 5% RIF fund. We're going to move on to the next slide, and I think I'm going to hand it over to you, Jess Larson, to just briefly discuss the first 2 years, and yeah, over to you.
Thank you. Happy to help. Are there several slides? Which slides am I covering, Liam?
Just the next two, and then if Adam Brown leaves, I'll clue you in again.
So just 2 slides, and can I see what the next slide is, and then we'll come back to this one?
Ooh, preview.
Okay,
Spoiler alert.
Oh, that's my slide as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I'm ready. Thank you, Liam. So just to continue on with this context setting around the Regional Investment Fund, this was part of the initial measure that, I think it was section 23, the last item in the measure, that created this here Tri-County Planning Body and envisioned that we would need resources dedicated to help bring into fruition the vision and the opportunities towards regionalism that this body would select and want to further. So we have these resources designed to help us achieve the goals set by this body, which is very exciting. And they are sitting in our bank accounts in the 3 counties, ready to be put into action. And have some readiness already, or some of that action is also getting underway. I think part of the additional context that we discussed trying to provide at this time is how is it that we're here in year 3? You're going to see some dollar amounts in a future slide. That most of this funding has been set aside, almost entirely all of it. And that has a lot to do with what we've been doing in years 1 and 2, right? The counties have been scaling up significant new programs to bring these community services to bear, and now those outcomes are demonstrated in these exciting new annual reports. It took us a while to create this wonderful Tri-County Planning Body, and it took a while for the goals to be identified. That is the work that you've been doing together over the last year or so. So work has been moving forward expeditiously. We don't want to suggest that we've been setting this funding aside and not thinking about it. We've been thinking about regionalism right from the get-go. The wonderful Regional Long-Term Rent Assistance Program is a fantastic example of regional coordination. It's based on the long-term rent assistance program that Multnomah County piloted before the SHS measure was ever envisioned, and now is in full implementation across all 3 counties, and thousands of people are living in their homes paid for with this regionally designed, regionally collaborated program. And that's just one of many regional programs that have been made possible through regional coordination.
And if I may, before you go into further examples of regional coordination, I think it's really important to note here that the counties in year 1, year 2 have been really focused on working with service providers on those direct services to serve people as fast as possible and to build out those programs that are, again, providing direct services. Many of you in this room are either leaders in those nonprofit service providers or work in those nonprofit service providers that have received SHS funding to roll out new programming. Thank you, Jess.
Yes. So work is underway, and a lot of that regional coordination that was envisioned to be supported through this measure and supported through this body's work has been going on in the last 2 years, in addition to all of that local county program expansion, as Liam was described. So I think the next slide is to get into those examples, and I just highlighted on the example of long-term rent assistance. Another one that's really, we've long talked about how confusing the point-in-time count is, how it's done differently in every county, and 1 year to the next, the way you add up the numbers, it's not quite the same, and you can't add all the numbers together. Well, this year, we used regional methodology. Our data staff worked with our program staff for many months, and consultants that we have long trusted with HRAC to help us design a regional methodology to go out and count our community experiencing homelessness with one consistent approach all across the region with the same questionnaire. And so now the numbers make sense to one another, and we have a regional count, and we'll continue to do that work as a region. We've also been coordinating on all of our programmatic envisioning of what landlord support, landlord recruitment can look like. There's more to be done. We're thrilled that this is one of the goals set by the TCPB, and we're going to hear more about this from our consultant this evening. And we have landlord liaisons in each of the counties who meet regularly to coordinate on communications, strategies, how to, they helped develop the Regional Risk Mitigation Fund, which is available to help landlords more confidently partner with us. So this short list here as a way to describe for you all the regional coordination work that is already happening in the counties with Metro's partnership in alignment with many of the goals you've set, even though it might not feel that you have taken actual official action on what the next step is in these 6 goals. Your goals are our goals, and that work is already underway in various iterations in the counties and will continue. And I think there's one important thing I'm also supposed to describe here. The counties and Metro have worked to really understand the intent of the Regional Investment Fund, and that while the regional long-term rent assistance voucher, for example, is a great demonstration of what we can create when we come together. It's not a great example of what the RIF would fund, because it's a program that directly serves individuals in our community. And our understanding is the purpose of the RIF is to support the collaboration, the construction of new systems of coordination across the region. It's not intended to fund programmatic work. So we can do system design, system coordination, and collaboration and fund that work. And then if it's a program that's going to be directly delivered in the community, that would be a part of the county's regular budgets and not, well, this is a part of the budget, but it would be not funded through the risk mitigation, too many RIFs or acronyms, not funded through the Regional Investment Fund. So Liam, I hope I fulfilled all of my assigned talking points, and I'll be here to help as we go along in the rest of the presentation.
So then before you go, Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. I actually wanted to just point out that 3 of those items, everything but the point in time count, is related to the next agenda item. And the counties, we've done a lot, but the question is what can be regionalized, or how do we make sure that we get the biggest bang for the buck? And I think there's a lot of stuff in this report that helps us look at this. And I think it's important to realize that this is in process, year 1 and 2, and yet there's way more we can do if we work collectively as a region. So I'm interested in this next discussion.
Yeah, thanks for your helping tee it up. Mercedes, please.
First question, the Regional Long-Term Rent Assistance Program, are the vouchers that are assigned there portable? If I start in Washington County, can I move to Clackamas or Multnomah County?
This is an excellent question, and I think that there's still programmatic work to do to design that portability, because the rent assistance, it's one thing to design flexibility and budget management of how the rent assistance that pays your rent might move from one housing authority to the next, but it's another thing to design how the services that are often paired with that voucher, because right now Arla is primarily our PSH tool, and so we have housing case management contracted through a service provider and a deep relationship with that household, paired with that rent assistance that keeps them housed. So if that household wants to move to another county, there's complexity in figuring out how we also help them move their service provision. And I think that there's been policy guidance drafted between the 3 counties about supporting this, and Ebony is going to tell us how it's actually working on the ground in our community. And there's intention, and I think there's struggle to actually bring it into fruition. So
yeah, thank you. If I could just finish, I asked that question because I kind of knew the answer to that, and I was disappointed to be learning that people were not able to do that, because I know that was part of the vision of a coordinated tri-county program. So in my opinion, at this point, this is not a coordinated tri-county program. This is 3 county programs. And I think the same can be said about the risk mitigation. It's also 3 separate county programs. And to the comments that were made a second ago, as we get into the landlord recruitment and retention, I'm a little bit worried we're going to have 3 different programs. So I just want, I love, kind of seeing these examples up here, but I also think that maybe we're giving ourselves credit for things that we haven't quite regionalized yet.
Let's go to Ebony, then Matt, and then we'll.
Well said, Mercedes. That was pretty much what I was going to say. Whereas, I'm happy that the 3 counties came to work together to make these things possible. As of right now, none of these services are regional. Speaking, they don't talk to each other. So it really puts certain counties at a disadvantage, Washington County actually being one of them. And also, I mean, it overstresses one county out of all three, and Clackamas County being one of them as well. But there are more services for more underserved communities in Multnomah County than there are in Clackamas County and Washington County. Therefore, when you look at our numbers for 100 days in programming, we have quite a few in our Washington County program because there are no services for those individuals. And we can't say just because there's no services for you, you are on the street. We simply have to wait out the counties until they allow portability to another county. But I'm hoping that with this landlord recruitment and with the ARLA assistance, our ARLA coordination, that we will eventually get to that. Because, I mean, even right now with our regional risk mitigation, I talked to other organizations that are in different counties, and some of them just have no idea that that is a tool offered to them. So, yeah, and a lot of the time we're just throwing away $4,000 for one unit when I'm sure that we could be attempting to gather more spaces. But it's a great tool. But again, like you said, this is not necessarily regional. This is coordination for sure. And I'm glad there's relationship built there, but hopefully the relationship will build enough to where we can create a system that actually helps our clients use the services the way they were intended to.
Great, thank you. Let's go, Matt.
Sure.
Abby? Yep.
Yeah, so maybe just a quick reminder and set up, excuse me, for some of the stuff that we need to talk about over the next couple of years, I guess, many years. And that is, there are certain of the things that we're going to be dealing with which just inherently make more sense to be done regionally or even consolidated. And there's other things where coordination is the right answer. And I think, again, I guess, Liam, with apologies, we're all previewing the next topic. But I wanted to add at this point, just a quick reminder that there's one area that was particularly a focus of the folks who dreamed up the TCPB, and I've talked with them and such, and that is in the data side. And the good news side is there. If we think back to the presentation that Dan Cole made about 2 meetings ago, I think it was, the idea of the HMIS and the ecosystem that is in the process of being designed strikes me, and I think this is what he is saying, is that this is going to be a centralized system administered by Multnomah County for all the other counties. So I just want to, I believe that to be the case. If I'm incorrect, please correct me. But I think that can form an example on these two extremes of things where coordination is plenty and it needs to be centralized, because if it's not centralized, it's going to wind up being ineffective with redundancy and inefficiencies. So just laying a foundation for some of the assumptions.
I'm going to do a little bit of a time check. We got 3 cards. I do want to just acknowledge, like, this is literally the conversation that we're moving towards in terms of how do we define regionalization, take advantage of it. I think it was Chair Harrington, then Councilor, we'll just go to this order. Abby, you might have been first. Jump in, Abby, I think you were first.
Yeah,
She's far
sorry.
away.
I just wanted, I didn't have a microphone earlier, just wanted to double back on the cross-county transfer. We have a meeting coming up on November 16th. Each county has a deadline to come up with their internal process for ensuring services are available for that transfer by that date, in which point we'll be piloting a transfer. So that's the plan there. We're working towards it. I agree that that's necessary for it to be a true regional program.
Great. Let's go Chair Harrington, then Councilor Lewis, and then I'm going to go back to Liam.
I don't mind having us as a committee identifying that there are needs we need to continue to build towards, especially since we only have 2 years of execution under our belt. But I'm going to remain optimistic and keep championing that the word "yet" is used.
I thank you for that frame. Councilor Lewis?
Sure, thank you so much. I'm really glad we're at this level of weeds, but I also just want us to remember that the intent here is around innovation and movement towards the future state that we want to see. And if we keep saying, are we going to do this 3 times over in 3 counties, or are we going to do it 1 time over regional?
I don't think you.
I'm like amateur hour over here. I see this microphone literally 3 days a week. But if we still are stuck between, is it ×3 or ×1, we're missing the whole boat, which is innovation and change.
Yeah, thank you. All right, with that, Liam, let's go back to you. Or who's going? Is there more slides? Adam, who's next? Go to the next slide, and whoever's going to start talking.
Am I good to go?
Yeah, please.
Wonderful.
Your slide?
So the next 4 slides are going to cover the numbers, and I'll go through it somewhat slowly, but you should all remember that these numbers are in your packet. If you have any questions, you can refer back to your packet. You can also send us questions by email, and our staff would be more than happy to answer you. But what you're looking at right now is the RIF, basically. In the first couple of years, we've combined FY20 with FY21 because we started receiving tax revenue in April of 21 that year. But needless to say, these are the numbers through FY23. That's through June 30th of this year. Okay. Next slide, please, Gio. This is the cumulative total, and so up to June 30th of this year, there was 26.8 million without accounting for the county's spending of that RIF. And in the next slide, you'll see the subtraction of that negligible amount, which is what Jess had referred to earlier. If you want to get to the next slide, please, Gio. So you take 0.3 million, about 300,000, away from the 26.8, and you've got about 26.5 million in carryover into this current fiscal year. Also understanding that we have an entire fiscal year to collect SHS revenue and have a full picture of what we will collect. But I think what's important to note here is going back to Jess's point earlier, with the counties and service providers focused on developing and rolling out programs that serve folks directly, they were spending their own allocations towards that goal. We're getting more to a point where Chair Harrington added that important word yet. And we're seeing a lot of convergence around the energy, I think definitely this table, but in multiple tables about, well, what do we do next? Next slide, please, Gio. Okay, so this is the current estimate for the allocations into each of the counties' accounts that make up the RIF. This is based on our current FY24 revenue of $234 million. And it doesn't include the previous slide of carryover figures, but what we're looking at is about 36 million total there by the end of this fiscal year, Mercedes. I saw your eyebrows there. So next slide, please, Joe. Now, if Adam Brown is still on the line, I know he's trying to get to Arizona as fast as he can, but I see you there, Adam, actually. This is your slide. If you want to take it away. Thanks for sticking around.
Yeah, thanks, Liam, and thanks, everybody. So I won't belabor this too much because we've touched on some of this stuff already. But, you know, I've heard coordination versus consolidation, and I think that's really kind of at the crux of what we're trying to accomplish. There will be things where coordination is our primary objective, and then there are things where consolidation is the objective for the sake of our ability to effectively deliver the services as efficiently as we can, and for the sake of administrative efficiency. And you know, so with regard to capacity building, when we make individual investments in our systems of care at the county level, we're also doing that with an eye towards you know, kind of artificial geographical boundaries for the people that we're serving. And when we invest in our community-based organizations, we're investing in their ability to serve our region. So we're going to continue to lean into that. Similarly with health and housing integration, Vahid mentioned, you know, that in Clackamas County, we've budgeted 2 positions, hired 2 really well-qualified folks to help support that initiative here. There's also conversations have been happening since April with a group of stakeholders from the county, our health system partners, our state partners around the Medicaid waiver implementation and incorporating those funds into the bigger picture of braided funding and services that we have here in the Tri-County area. And then really with the goal of providing more and better access to behavioral health services. We know addictions and recovery issues are a huge challenge facing our systems, and we're working more and harder every day to make sure that we get the resources that people need to support their access to stable housing. And then we again had this discussion around coordination versus consolidation. And I think this administrative consolidation is one of the biggest virtues of having a pot of money that is dedicated towards regional coordination. So, for example, something like the administration of the homeless management information system. So when governments partner on something like that, we have intergovernmental agreements that dictate the terms of that system. And then we compensate each other for that cost, right? So we have licensing costs that we have to pay for as counties. Multnomah County has staff that they have to pay for to administer that system on behalf of the region. But we need to start asking the question of, does it make sense for us to invoice each other for those costs, right? We talk a lot about the administrative burden of trading money and making payments and trying to make them as quickly as we can. So when you have a dedicated resource that's specifically allocated for the efficient provision of services across the region, we need to ask ourselves, does it make sense to continue trading that money back and forth? Or instead, should we be working towards each of the counties finding ways of holding certain administrative responsibilities on behalf of the other counties towards this shared benefit, right? And we don't want any one county or metro shouldering a disproportionate amount of the burden, but to function effectively as a well-coordinated system, we have to be thinking about this administrative efficiency, not just for us as counties and metro, but also for our service providers as well and how we support them. So that's, you all know I wear the badge of technocrat as a badge of honor. And this is one of the things that I spend a lot of my time focusing on. And then we talked a little bit about regional risk mitigation, so I won't go into too many details there. But again, there was the comment that this is a regional design program, but it's being administered individually by the counties. That's true, but the terms of the program were a tri-county partnership, and so we're paying the claims individually because the unit, say, exists in Clackamas County or the unit exists in Washington County, but it was conceived as a regionally consistent program. And so I think the yet question, Chair Harrington, I appreciate that. We're taking steps to further our goals of a more well-coordinated, more consolidated, more standardized regional system of care. And so I think yet is the really important question to help us continue to grow and take steps towards making these shared initiatives as effective as we can.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Was there more slides?
That's it, but I also want to thank Adam too for contributing and making the time to come here today. I know you had a conflict, so thank you.
Great. So in the looking at our time, unless there's a incredibly burning question, that's my way of saying don't ask any more questions. So let's move on. We have a couple folks from Focus Strategies. Liam, I hope you tee it up. Mark, Hannah, is it Hannah or Hannah? Hannah, I see you out there somewhere. I did see you. Yep. So why don't you tee it up, and then can we create a space?
You're going to take Jess's seat.
We'll take Jess's seat. Thank you, Jess.
Okay, while Mark ambles over to Giovanni's seat, this work started a while back. This was one of the first goals, if not the first goal, that you all approved. We brought in Focus Strategies, who are already on call to do this work for us, and we're really grateful for Hannah Gossett and Mark Jolin's contributions. I'm not going to steal anything away from Mark in his presentation about the process, but with the scope of work that we developed with the counties, I believe that Hannah and Mark have fully executed on that scope, and I'm really excited for you all to hear from Mark today. Welcome, Mark Jolin.
All right, you got it? Yeah, I think it's going now. All right.
So Liam, do you think that Metro could invest part of the RIF in
Better
more
light.
user-friendly microphones?
Not yet. Well, so thank you all for having us here today. Again, I'm Mark Joel, and I'm with Focus Strategies, and I'm joined today by Hannah Gossett. Hannah, is Hannah out there?
Hannah's out there. Hannah, your camera's not on though. Now you are. And you got your background, logoed background. That's great. You can't see her, but she's out there.
There she is.
Yeah, she's
Okay,
there. Oh,
welcome.
there she is.
So we are both consultants at Focus Strategies, and Focus Strategies is a small firm. We're about 15 consultants right now. We work with communities only on one thing, and that is improving their response to the crisis of homelessness. We work in states all over the country. We do a fair amount in California in particular, but we've been working in this region quite a bit of late. And we have the benefit of having a team of people, all of whom have done years of work in homeless response systems in different parts of the country. So as we went into this project, not only, as you'll hear, did we have the benefit of lots of perspectives shared with us by community stakeholders and national stakeholders, we also had the benefit of the experience of our team. So we really appreciated the opportunity to work on this. I've been asked to keep my presentation short so that there can be a lot of question and answer. Hopefully you had a chance to read this memorandum. I do want to say in terms of the scope, it is a memorandum. It wasn't intended to be a full report. That meant we had some limits on how many people we could talk to, how many different communities we could look at. So, this is information that hopefully will be really useful to you and to this community for thinking about where the opportunities lie to do more around unit acquisition, and I'll talk a little bit about why I'm using that phrase. Hopefully it was clear in the report. But there is more work to be done when we get into that phase of implementation and really thinking about which of these lessons that we see from communities around the country and from this community stakeholders can be turned into the kind of opportunities for alignment, consolidation, centralization that everybody's been talking about. So if we can go to the next slide, please. We essentially will do this as an overview of the presentation. We'll talk a little bit about our information gathering strategy, some of the things we learned from the national model review, the local context. We heard a lot of great feedback from local stakeholders, some specific equity considerations that came up repeatedly as we did our work, and then some of the other things that we heard from stakeholders here in particular as we think about the next steps of this work. And then there is a list of the opportunities to explore that are the opportunities that are listed in the memorandum. I'm hopeful that you all had a chance to look at the memorandum and that can be mostly part of the question and answer, but I'm happy to go through it in whatever level of detail would be helpful. Next slide, please. So in terms of the information gathering, we spent a good deal of time looking at the national best practices literature in this space, and it is work that has been happening at the national level since about 2015 in the sense that it is identified as a practice area. How do we identify landlords? How do we recruit them? How do we retain them into this work? There is a shift into the language of unit acquisition, and what we tried to explain in the memorandum is that helping people get access to units primarily in the private market is in part about developing partnerships with owners and managers of residential units. But there are a lot of other critical elements to that process that also have to get investment. And one of the things that we heard loud and clear from stakeholders was how important those other aspects are to the success of any effort to get somebody into a private market unit. So yes, we want landlord partnerships, but that conversation needs to be happening in the context of these other elements also being present: barrier removal, housing case management, the kinds of things that the providers do every day to get folks in, even if there isn't a formal partnership in place with a housing manager or housing owner. Sorry, Gio, go back for just a second. So there were the national conversations and review of data. We had conversations with a number of national programs that are really demonstrating effectiveness. Then we had a series of conversations with local stakeholders, a good number of conversations with social service providers, and a few conversations with folks with lived experience. That was a very small group of people. We can talk more about that. I think anything that moves forward is going to have additional community engagement with folks with lived experience and expertise and providers, and of course with the counties and you all at the table for those discussions. Next slide, please. So in terms of the national work that is happening, HUD and the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness and National Alliance to End Homelessness all have kind of weighed in and looked at models around the country and have developed rubrics, and we shared those with you in the document or in the memorandum. So, but here are a few of the things that stand out. One, there is generally a really concerted effort around communicating with the owners of residential properties, rental properties, and not just sort of advertising in the sense of here is an opportunity, but really doing education either through websites or trainings. And we heard this from local stakeholders, how important it was to have a concerted effort around educating the property owners or the housing providers that didn't rely on the individual agencies and their staffs to be doing that all the time. Then there are, of course, a whole range of financial incentives that are offered, and we go through some of those, and we have most of those in this community, so there's not a lot there, but that package of different incentives that can encourage a housing provider to make a unit available, it's important. And as we'll talk about, what we've heard pretty clearly is for a lot of the housing providers in the community, those incentives matter, but they're really trying to get stable tenants. And so what we called housing problem solving here in this memo, you can call it tenant stabilization services, you can call it any number of things, but that responsiveness when an issue arises is as important as any individual financial incentive that there might be. So that is a feature of all these national models. And I will say, because this comes up again later, the national models that are working really well have figured out how to negotiate agreements with housing providers where there are specific concessions being made around the criteria that are being used to screen people in or out of housing. So it's really important to align the benefits that are being offered to housing providers with the benefits that they're offering to the people that we're trying to get housed. The consolidation, and this comes up a lot in the memo, I want to be clear that even the best national models haven't somehow easily consolidated everything that's going on in a really large region. What they've done is they've looked at the opportunity and said, you know what, we can consolidate the negotiation of agreements with housing providers on behalf of a network of social service providers. How big that network is, how big a region that covers, that's going to be a very locally specific conversation. We can consolidate the administration of financial incentives, right? Again, that doesn't mean it's for all the housing or partnership work that's happening in the community necessarily, but it's bringing together those opportunities where you've got multiple entities trying to administer funds in slightly different ways. You consolidate that and make it to the benefit of all of the social service providers that are part of your network. And then similarly, when it comes to consolidating across subsidy types, and this is an important one, right? The programs that are working really well nationally are looking for opportunities to pull more subsidy sources under the umbrella of the work that they're doing, right? So right now, locally, we have an ARLA program that has a set of subsidies attached to it, or a set of incentives attached to it. Can you bring other subsidy types under that same umbrella so that if someone's got an ARLA voucher or someone has got a state emergency voucher or one of the federal vouchers, can they still get the benefit of that same coordinated administration or centralized administration? Next slide, please. The problem-solving practices I already mentioned. This is a real point of emphasis among the programs that are working nationally. This is having a good mechanism in place that when an issue arises with a tenant that might jeopardize the tenancy, there's a response, there's a service support to the owner or operator of that housing. This is resonant with what we heard from community-based providers right now about how important maintaining those relationships with landlords is and how central this responsiveness is to that. We heard it from the housing providers or landlord community as well, like this is the thing, so that shows up in the national work. There are some really sophisticated platforms that are now emerging around the country to help consolidate the unit inventory, help housing navigators and participants search for units, understand the application process. They're set up to allow people to really screen for the kinds of barriers that they may face and the incentives that they bring. So using technology as an integrated part of these systems is one of the things we see. And then finally, the national models are really looking at how they can use the data that they have and the partnerships that they've created to understand how the system is performing. And this becomes very relevant as we try to call out when we're looking at the equity implications of the work that's happening, right? Who is being served? Which housing providers are serving which people? Where do we see gaps in who's being served? Do we see racial dynamics emerging because some housing providers are not renting or not working with culturally specific providers? Those kinds of things become much easier to understand if you have a sophisticated data system and a monitoring process set up for your system. Next slide, please. So in the local context, we've already heard there's a tremendous amount of good work that is happening across the 3 counties and in the region. And you have multiple different acquisition efforts that are underway with differences among them, differences in benefit levels that are offered, differences in recruitment strategies. And so, you see this as a theme. It means that there may be opportunities to look at that sort of set of acquisition efforts that are underway and see if there are opportunities to consolidate some of that work and make it more efficient and more equitable. One of the features, and we try to highlight this in the report, is when you have multiple smaller efforts underway rather than a more consolidated one, you're making investments in the important elements of a unit acquisition system, right? You're going to do a little bit of information gathering and partnership development, and you're going to do some responsive problem solving, and you'll maintain some inventory system for the units that you do have available to you, but you probably aren't able to invest the kind of resource in it that it would be necessary in the way that you can if you're saying, okay, we're going to cover a wider swath of the work under this and consolidate those investments into a more robust problem-solving response data system, however you want to look at it. Next slide, please. So we do, as a part of this, have different incentive levels across the different types of unit acquisition efforts that are out there, different administrative strategies. The unit inventories are being maintained in very different ways. We have providers that are just collecting their own lists of units. They've got spreadsheets internally. We heard even that some individual housing case managers are maintaining their own lists because they've got their relationships and they're protective of those. That's understandable. But we also have emerging models in Washington, Clackamas County and in Multnomah County. The state has got Rentwell as a system that is set up for their inventory management, and some of our local providers are participants in that. And then overall, what we heard from the community-based organizations that we talked to is that the systems we have in place right now in the metro region are heavily reliant on the providers themselves to do the work, in the sense of going out, identifying the landlords, educating them about the programs, getting them to agree to partner with them, doing the responsive work. So again, that's a challenge, and we can talk about what the equity implications are of that as well. We heard pretty clearly concerns there, and what some level of consolidation might do to address some of that, that reliance on the individual providers. Next slide, please. So one of the recommendations, opportunities for additional exploration in our memo is clearly to bring an equity lens to every element of the work that is happening around unit acquisition, because we heard it at the national level, but especially locally, as we addressed with stakeholders each of the different component parts. There were real equity concerns that arose. And generally, for example, there is a potential value in consolidation because, say, for example, not all organizations are equally well-resourced to go out and build partnerships with landlords, administer financial incentives, have risk mitigation funds, and so forth. And often it's the longer established majority culture organizations that have that resource. At the same time, there was a lot of concern articulated about what happens when you consolidate, whether as you do that, you push marginalized communities further to the margins, whether that's the culturally specific providers and the people they serve, or the housing providers that are in specific communities that may not feel welcomed into this new centralized process. So one of the tension points that you heard or saw in our memorandum is balancing that, recognizing where there are potential equity, racial equity gains, and where there are risks, and making sure any program implementation reflects that, that tension. Next slide, please. So this is essentially what I just shared. And I won't read it to you, but we can get into more detail about some of these equity dimensions if folks want to talk more about that. Next slide, please. So relationships matter. For those of you who have known me for a while, you know that I was once upon a time at Join, and we heard this repeatedly from our providers in particular, the community-based organizations, but also from the housing providers who said, you know what, systems are great, but if they don't work, we would much rather have a relationship to rely on. And so as you think collectively about opportunities to centralize and systematize and make things more efficient, if those systems don't work, there is the risk that your providers and the people they serve are in a worse situation than they're in right now. Because at the end of the day, those relationships that have been built, people can rely on those, whether it's the housing manager or the case manager. So that came across loud and clear. The problem-solving supports, as I said, are absolutely critical. So, and we heard this across the board, and we see it in the national models. The financial incentives, individual financial incentives are great. Stable tenants with reliable rent are the key. So again, just kind of looking at where you're putting the investments. And this becomes important for some of the recommendations. The providers in the community identified their biggest challenge being to house those folks who have the highest barriers. And the reason that's important is that, you know, as we build these partnerships and negotiate agreements with landlords, and as we think about things like agency leasing, really looking at how we can find those opportunities to bring the screening criteria down and get some of the folks who are hardest to housed. And that is right now a challenge, even as we do all of this other really important work in the community. Next slide, please. I said this at the beginning, we heard it loud and clear. Partnerships are great. The idea of investing in partnerships, very important. And there need to be significant investments in other parts of the system that also help people into housing. Again, those are the barrier removal dollars. Those are the housing case managers that help with the navigation. Those parts are critical, and we spoke to that in the memorandum. We heard from the counties about the importance of recognizing the different places that they are in their work around landlord partnerships. And as it was mentioned before, there's already an effort going on around coordination. So I think it was clear that while there are it makes intuitive sense to focus on opportunities for consolidation and better integration, there are also going to be some specific circumstances in the counties that need to be part of the conversation as you move towards an implementation strategy. And then finally, we heard from multiple stakeholders that culturally specific providers, staff of color who are out trying to do the work of recruiting landlords are running into barriers that majority culture providers and white people who are out doing this work are not running into. And that overall, and this is back to bringing the equity lens to all aspects of this work, that overall, whatever gets put in place here has to do a better job of getting folks of color who are overrepresented in the homeless population into housing, not leave folks further behind than they already are. And again, there is a genuine risk of that if that equity lens isn't brought to bear in the conversations around implementation of each of these steps. Next slide. So these are the opportunities for further exploration. I'll just read them and I'll be done. So there is an opportunity, I think, to look at how landlord recruitment communication is being done at the county level and at the regional level, and how education is happening and training of landlords about what it means to participate in these programs, what the incentives are that they can benefit from, what the expectations are of them if they're participating. I think there are some opportunities to look at consolidating the partnership formation responsibilities. That means the negotiation out there with landlords on behalf of social service providers and the people that they're serving and trying to house. The financial incentives, right now, if you had a chance to look at the memorandum, there are multiple dimensions here. It's less about the the sort of particular list of incentives, but I think especially with the flexibility in SHS, there's an opportunity to try to make sure that regardless of the type of subsidy that somebody has that they're trying to get deployed in the market, they have a similar set of incentives to offer out there. And right now you don't really have that. The agency leasing conversation, you saw, we're using that phrase, that is the phrase locally. In other places, it's referred to as master leasing. So, but really, this is an opportunity to, coming back to that idea around the folks who have the highest barriers. You've got some really good models in Multnomah County in particular of organizations that have entered into these kinds of agency leases and are able to use those partnerships to really get some of their hardest to house folks housed. And largely what that comes down to is that because they are the tenants, because the organization is the tenant, they provide a higher level of financial protection to that housing provider than the other types of incentives that are like a risk mitigation fund that has a cap on it and that kind of thing. And so there is an opportunity to, through that partnership to give more protection to the owner of the rental unit, give more opportunity to the social service provider to get folks into housing who they're struggling to get housed right now. Prioritizing the quality problem-solving services, we've talked about that. Consolidating the key aspects of tracking and accessing unit inventory. This is a conversation about are there ways in which we could adopt a platform locally or regionally that offers some of the power of these really sophisticated platforms out there while still making sure that each county's needs are being met. And then finally, looking at the other aspects of unit acquisition that need investments. So I probably took more than 15 minutes, but that is our presentation.
Thank you, Mark. So as a reminder, we're going to have a deeper conversation as part 2 of this. But if we could focus right now on any questions for clarity, reflections on the memo, anything that you want to ask. Mercedes, jump in.
I was wondering if any, in your landscape review, probably outside of the state, because I don't think we have something inside the state, or maybe there might be, but anybody who tried to actually build more of a mission-based nonprofit or maybe B Corp property management company? Because it sounds like we have the property owner, the social service provider, the property manager, and now we're trying to add like a fourth person to coordinate between the social service provider and the property manager for the benefit of the owner. I'm just wondering if anyone ever just tried to like be the property manager.
So, yes, I mean, honestly, you have, well, I was gonna say, you have some examples in Portland, right, with some place like Central City Concern.
Sure,
but
I'm thinking of non-owner operator.
Non-owner, so yes, so an organization like Brilliant Corners, I mean, when you sort of go on the continuum, you have entities like DISH, which is Developing Innovation and Supportive Housing in California. You've got Brilliant Corners, where they're essentially going in and taking over the property and also doing the property management functions and the tenant support service functions, and then partnering with social service providers to do the wraparound supports, the more intensive ones. So that's sort of one end of the continuum. And then you have programs that are agency leasing programs where the actual property management functions stay with the owner operator of the units, right? And the sort of the service provider continues to provide the service provision and maybe the tenancy supports, or maybe you've got an outside entity that's coming in and doing the problem solving, right? The national sort of best practices that HUD and those folks have talked about or put together talk about a neutral third-party mediator. So the idea is that third-party entity that maybe is doing your negotiation with the landlords and administering your incentives may also be sending the person to the site to do the problem solving. There are real differences of opinion about whether that's a good option or not. I think providers worry that it costs them the relationship with the property manager. There are worries that it may not actually function as well as a partnership on the ground level. But yes, so to answer your question, there is that end of the continuum where an entity comes in and says, we'll do the property management, we'll decide who comes in, and we'll do the tenancy support services. So that is an option.
Ebony, did you want to? Yeah, did you want to add?
Actually, last year, we wound up going through a bunch of training to, make sure that we're able to, 1, do property management, and 2, do the background checks and everything. We asked counties if that is something that they would be interested in, and that is not something that they're currently focused on. Yet. But it is something that, after seeing, especially right now, I think a clear example is there's a property in Washington County that is PSH, but it's a for-profit company that is kind of leading the way, and so makes it very hard to, one, get people indoors, and two, to keep people indoors when they don't understand running a PSH and the background checks on that maybe some nonprofit lens would be actually a really good thing. But
Thank you. Christina, I thought I saw your hand.
Yes, but I was thinking if my question will be more related to wages, because as we were talking about recruiting landlords and all that, I heard one of the difficulties is there is not enough, or there are actually some management companies that are opting out to manage properties. And I think that's huge. And when we recruit them, I like the plan of how they're being recruited, but I think until we get to the root of the problem, it's gonna make everyone's jobs very hard. So I don't really know where my concern fits, but I wanted to get it out there that is happening. As Housing Oregon, as industry support, that's what I've been hearing the last 2 or 3 months. And I'm only been there for 2 or 3 months, but I do talk to management companies and affordable housing providers and all that. So that's a real thing that I think we need to acknowledge, yes, for recruitment, but how do we make sure we're acknowledging what is happening, the challenges that they're having, and helping to break those barriers? Thanks.
Right, so if I heard you correctly, then Christina, there's another conversation. I mean, I think that's alluded to in the memo around eliminating or getting around barriers, but we got to deeply understand what those are and how we reconcile and respond to them. Okay. Thank you. Steve, were you going to jump in?
It's not a question.
You could.
Yeah. Well, I just think that this is a moment in time I think is really important. I think incredible work has been done in the counties in the first 2 years. And yet we know that the voters who voted for this still see people living on the streets. And so the amount of money that we have here is unprecedented. And another thing besides the amount of money, it's the amount of flexibility that we have. So this is not to replace any efforts that we talk about from the counties. It's how do you add value. And if you look at I guess Mark doesn't want to use the word recommendations, opportunities for further exploration, it's a very important statement that I think we either have to agree to or not, which is, at the highest level, opportunities at the metro region involve exploring ways to consolidate and align elements of the multiple existing unit acquisition efforts, the rent assistance efforts. The fragmented unit acquisition landscape in the metro area is leading to certain redundancies, potential inefficiencies, and inequities. Now, I agree with that statement. That doesn't mean we're not doing a great job, people doing what they can. But I really still feel that the various parts, when we add them up, it doesn't seem to be a greater whole. I mean, what is the role of Metro? Metro has 20 staffers or so right now, they're building up. Counties are busy. You know, there is some elements of what we have here that's really important. Really important. I mean, but yet, you look at the basic thing, develop a comprehensive communication and education program for housing providers, which means owners, landlords, property managers. Why can't we do that? And it should be done the whole region. It's a website, it's all kinds of things we articulate, and over time, more people see it's successful, and it's a way to actually be done jointly by all 3 counties. I mean, to me, I thought Commissioner Jayapal and I mentioned this in 2022. And, it takes a long time for this stuff to happen, but we're ready, I believe, as a region. Because of the flexibility and the amount of money, the $25 million of the Regional Investment Fund. It's just not going to come out of anybody's individual pockets. But how do we make sure it adds value? And there's lots of recommendations. If you dig each one of these things, there's some really tremendous things, because what we're really trying to do at the voter level, they want to see homeless people housed. And landlords want good tenants. And, and service providers want to find places for their folks to live. And how do you put systems in place or supports to make that happen? We have elements. We have a lot of elements. But, it's really important that we begin to think about how we can do things that make sense across the counties. I mean, if one county, a good example was the HMIS, is doing it, they could either do it, one county does it for everybody, or you create something that's regional. Either Metro does it, or you hire some nonprofit, or you create a nonprofit that does this. I'm very impressed with Brilliant Corners. Washington, Multnomah County is working with, what's it called? Housing Connections. They're both platforms that are proven to work. It's not like a be-all, end-all. It's not a panacea, but it adds value. I think it's very important. So there's all that piece. If I'm looking at each one of them, but the rationalizing of system of incentives is important. I spent most of my career in government, public sector programs, if you will, for housing. And if you're not in this world, the numbers of names and the different programs that basically are trying to do the same thing, but if they're federal or state or local, they all have different roles and they're different platforms. So like ARLA or the Rent Guarantee Fund or whatever we use to make SHS work, we have the ability and flexibility in this region to convey that, and Mark mentions this, to all the programs. So if you have a shelter plus care thing, but the landlord doesn't have access to a guarantee fund, let's give them access to the guarantee fund. Let's expand the number of units that we can actually assist. Let's make it simple. Translate all the gobbledygook into how do we actually provide supports to get a system that works. We really have this incredible opportunity. I believe there is a lot of food for thought here. But what it really is going to take is we have to evolve into a regional mindset, which is really hard. I work for government, atomization of programs. How do we actually get to a place where we share resources based on mutual trust, coordination, and collaboration? We can do that, but this is the time for us to start acting. We need to do this. This first recommendation, besides the equity lens, was very important. Keep in mind in everything we do. But the comprehensive communication and education program, that should have been done. And I think it needs to be done in 6 months. Hire some people, do it, get all the counties involved, and make sure that a landlord can understand it. Why do we put the burden on a social service provider to have to understand all these different programs and what do you get when it should be the same thing? And we can really think differently. I just really hope that we can take a step back and think about, we have an incredible ability right now in this community to do things that haven't been done anywhere, because we have money dedicated to the problem and we have flexibility. And when usually what we do in government, and I was there, I know this, is we make rules. Why? Because we always have rules. Well, so what we need to do is think about, what's the outcome? We need people housed. So sorry for the tirade, but I believe it's time to act.
That's great. Thank you. That wasn't a question, but it's a good tee up for our next part of the conversation. Chair Harrington, please.
It's on. So thank you, Steve. I appreciate those sentiments. What my comment is that I appreciate how the presentation brought this memo to life for me, because frankly, it was very dense. And over the course of the week, it took me a couple of times to approach this in order to get through this. And maybe, who knows, maybe it's all my problem. But what I'm getting out of this is we have a multi-step approach. So today's meeting was, we've had the written, we've had the opportunity for you to bring this to life for us, which is always very valuable for me. And I will remain optimistic. I think the staff, both here at Metro, regionally, and across our jurisdictions, do want to achieve these goals. And so I'm looking forward to the second step, whether it happens next month meeting or in 2 months, I don't know, right? But I'm looking forward to our staff getting together, reviewing this, and going, okay, we've built this capacity thus far in year 2, we're into year 3, and hiring people in 6 months is, but I remain optimistic.
Me
So
too.
that they can identify, of these good approaches, what ones do we think will be able to get going with here, here, and here? Sorry to invade your space, Catherine's virtual whiteboard, over the course of time, and go from there. So I am really pleased with the fact that across our staff, they have built more trust and experience with one another. They've got a lot of momentum going, and now is the time for us to take this great consultancy work and have them come together and give us, as the TCBP, their thoughts, as well as for each of the committee members to say, well, I thought, why don't you have X, Y, or Z out of the list there? Because I thought that would be useful from, my perspective. Or, golly day, why can't you advance this over here instead? So I'm really looking forward to that next step.
Good, thank you, Chair. And Chair Smith, I saw your comment in the chat. I'd love to invite you in if you want to speak to it a bit more. And I do think it's important that we're bringing in some of the possible considerations that we'll need to hold as we have these conversations. Did you want to speak to your comment?
Thank you, Ben. Trust is a huge issue, and while the past gentleman had great passion for what he perceives as to be the solution, I think we have much more work to do on the trust issue regarding one regional-wide system to do everything. Clackamas County is very independent and we're doing well, and we like being independent. Clackamas County voters voted no on this tax. And I'm going to keep reminding this body that. And so I think we need to be considerate of those factors. Clackamas County has made great gains, and you have mentioned those housing units today. And our yearly report is quite successful. However, we have citizens in every part of the county who are rising up against these efforts. And quite frankly, sometimes we're at a loss to address these issues. So I think we need to tread lightly on consolidation. And we need to pick our battles, and we need to pick exactly what we want to consolidate moving forward and take it one step at a time. And Ben, that's really all I have to say on this.
No, I appreciate you naming it, Chair. Thank you. I think I had Mercedes, then Councilor Lewis, then Matt.
I'd like to go back to some weed questions. I was wondering, in your review, if you saw any kind of capacity limitations for either the education or any of the other consolidated, I think the other consolidated piece was around how many different types of programs. Like, was there just kind of a sense of like, you can do this with up to 1,000 properties, any more than that, you're gonna start to fall apart, or you have to do it with at least 200, otherwise there's not enough efficiency?
Not at that level of specificity. I think what we heard more were the limit, that there are actual challenges that emerge. So for example, when you try to bring multiple different subsidy sources under one umbrella, there may be challenges in terms of who kind of is administratively responsible for those subsidy sources and their ability or willingness to kind of participate in that. There are going to be some geographic limitations. So the programs that we spoke to, I think were we're growing and we're still in a position to grow, and we're looking for opportunities to overcome some of those types of limitations, right? So how can we bring that additional funding source in? Or if we can, what do we need to adapt in our model to make that work? Or how many additional providers can we build into our network and make part of this? And it becomes a quality control conversation, right? Like they need to have enough resources in their organization, if there's some sort of lead entity, to continue to maintain the quality of service that sustains the partnerships, right? And whether that starts to fall apart at 50 or 500, I don't know the answer to that. But there are certainly, there are providers out there who could speak to that and where they saw their own limitations, right? And again, a different model, whether you're talking about something like Brilliant Corners, where they're going in and taking on buildings, and they probably can scale differently than it may be that Housing Connector feels like, well, there's only so far we can go with this model where we're playing the third party kind of fiscal administrator, contract negotiator, and then we've got community-based providers in our network who are doing the support service. They may have a different answer. So we didn't hear where that point is, but mostly we heard about the challenges of continuing to consolidate.
Okay. And then a second question, did you notice any differences when you were talking to owners? So like Joe landlord who owns a building with 4 units versus Guardian Property Management Company, right? And what their needs or concerns were?
We didn't get to talk to smaller owners, unfortunately. So we asked questions and we heard from the community-based organizations that are out recruiting about their experience with smaller landlords and have some sort of in-house experience with both some of the sort of opportunities there, because often the smaller landlords are more amenable to being flexible around screening criteria if there's a good relationship that's established. And there's also some reluctance to participating in these bigger systems or in these larger bureaucratic kind of partnerships. So those two things are sort of both present, I think. We do talk about the importance in designing a coordinated consolidated system, for example, of really thinking about how, if you've got one entity that's doing all of the partnership cultivation, how are they reaching into that smaller landlord community? How are they reaching into owners of color, right? In communities where there may be other challenges, and how does the system reflect the importance of bringing those folks into the work? And that may be through that partner, that centralized partner, and also through continuing to support the culturally specific providers that are out building those relationships right now and making sure that they have the support and the resources to cultivate and maintain those relationships. But that is an area to keep working on, for sure.
So, Mike, I think you had to jump. I'm going to put you up in line because I know you had to leave early. You mind jumping in?
Yeah, thanks for calling on me earlier. I think trust has been brought up a lot during this discussion. And as I was kind of reading through the packet, a lot of the stuff we were talking about when, especially trying to scale something like this for recruiting. And I think we do need to have some type of central system in place. And then the next sentence will talk about how, service providers have their own relationships and it's going to be hard to break. At some point, we're going to have to trust. How are we going to bring these relationships into like a bigger group? Because if everyone is still out doing, we have the system in place that's supposed to bring all these landlords together, yet all the service providers are still sort of on the side doing it to some degree, cultivating their own relationships and stuff. We're going to see a ton of inefficiencies. And I think even with especially with smaller organizations, if they're cultivating these relationships and then we start talking about, wow, why are they so inefficient at doing this? It's because they're spending all this extra time working and developing relationships while other people are using a database, and then the smaller organizations look like they don't know what they're doing. So at some point we need to figure out a way to either through maybe like a broker fee or something to get people to pull these relationships and get it in this database that we're going to have, because we can't have 4 or 5 smaller service providers talking to the same people, going after the same people, and they're fighting over that group again. That's one thing I saw. The other thing, and I know I've brought this up in the past, with ARLA vouchers and everything, just in terms of how it fits together with this landlord recruitment. At some point, I think some of the dollars we start looking to try to regionalize this is trying to find a way to unlock some of these other dollars in terms of making vouchers or other things a little bit easier, because what's going to happen, all our dollars are supposed to be incremental into making this whole process better. But we're creating, I'm just kind of putting ARLA vouchers out there, but we've made ARLA vouchers easier than Section 8 housing. I know Section 8 housing, when I brought this up last time, there's a lot of issues with it. Can we use our resources to make that easier, to be more like ARLA, to unlock more dollars so we are getting incremental things? And those are things that, as I look through the packet where we're trying to meet, trying to provide a more standard level of service, we either got to start the bar at the lowest part and then work from there up, or we got to bring that bar up to a better level to make packages and whatever we have look a little bit better. Because we can't have one person having $2,500 here for helping with the risk mitigation, another person with $5,000, another person with another dollar amount. We might have to use some of our resources to up the floor a little higher, so the packages are a little bit more standard. But those are just some of the things I saw as I read through the memo.
Thanks. Do you want to?
I just want to, real quickly, I appreciate those reflections. I think the reason that we highlighted the importance of the relationships and how the work is happening right now was not to say that there isn't an important opportunity to help those smaller providers actually be better served than they currently are, right? In this system where they're having to do all the legwork, and they may have the resources or they may not, and then they're potentially competing against each other. But it was really to highlight the importance of whatever consolidation happens, really doing it right and making the necessary investment and taking the time to build it out in such a way that that system continues to protect those relationships, right? Because there are models where it is working to have an entity negotiating on behalf of multiple social service providers. At the same time, those social service providers are benefiting from that model because they don't have to have the in-house capacity to negotiate. They don't have to have the in-house capacity to administer the financial incentives. But they're benefiting because there's enough resource going into that model that they can trust that the housing providers are doing their part. They have the resources they need to do their part in that agreement. So it wasn't to say that the system should accommodate both the centralized and a lot of individuals. It was to say, if you're going to replace the current system, you got to make the investment to ensure that that relationship piece is preserved. And I just want to make sure that message was coming across.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go Councilor Lewis, then Matt, and I'm going to wrap us up for this part of the conversation.
Sure, thank you. I think this is an excellent memo and report. I guess when I think through kind of the recommendation or wrap up number 2 in terms of going beyond just the SHS funds and vouchers, I think that moves us from kind of the 2-dimensionality of just consolidation versus coordination across 3 counties. But it also brings us into the other funds that are in the 3rd dimension with different systems of care. And that, to me, suggests that we may also be thinking about different kinds of units. And I'm curious if you have thought about what the best practice is on moving beyond just the multifamily housing relationship and how that in different COCs might be more appropriate.
So there are certainly examples of programs that are looking at opportunities to partner with single-family homeowners and things like that, if that's what you have in mind. There's not a lot that's been done around a best practice with regard to that, so I think there's an opportunity for some innovation in that space to really, and again, we heard this admonition from people in this community saying, okay, and it shouldn't just be a model where you partner with the big property management companies. there are shared housing arrangements there. If you're talking about agency leasing, you're agency leasing a 5-bedroom home and you've got multiple people living there, right? So there is work to do to think about how you expand the idea here and make sure you can incorporate those different housing types, because frankly, you're gonna need them all, right? And so it's less a best practice conversation, more a recognition that that's an area to do some work as you think about expanding this kind of an approach.
Great, thank you.
Matt?
Yeah, so this may hopefully help Ben out and by way of a little bit of a transition to the next aspect, because it's both a question back for Mark's comments and others, and also just a perspective. Steve stepped out for a moment, but I did not spend my career in government. I spent my career in high tech, and one of the things that I would encourage us to consider is I don't think there is as great a disparity between what Chair Smith is describing as the constraints that are very real, that need to be considered, and Steve's perspective of, let's go for it and create this system. Because it really depends on, when we talk about centralization, consolidation, whatever term is preferred, and I will certainly say that I am very much of the view that that needs to be the primary solution to a lot of these issues. That does not mean that everybody has to do everything the same way. We can create systems and we can create organizations, and that could be a department within a county, a department within Metro, if that makes more sense. Though I think the counties are typically the ones that actually do the work in this level of things. And maybe there's some, there are outside resources, a couple have been mentioned already. So you take that panoply of possibilities and you say, okay, how do we combine them in such a way that the people who need the services can get coordinated, consistent services for landlord recruitment, for dispute resolution, and all of those kinds of things. But there's still the flexibility to recognize that the nature of the needs may be different based on the size of the organization, based on the ethnic and racial groups that they serve, based on geography, rural versus inner city, and all of those things. Those need to be part of the design of the system every bit as much as the systems that see to it that people are paid promptly and equitably and things of that sort. And what I want to stress is that I believe that can be done. And so my question goes back to Mark. You've talked about some of the systems that are being administered. The Brilliant Corners gets great reviews. Housing Connectors gets great reviews. I know a little bit about each of them because I've looked at their websites, but I am not familiar. Are there systems that you have seen that not only provide the necessary centralization, but also can provide the flexibility and implementation that empower people to do the right thing in the right moment, rather than basically confining them by a whole set of rules?
So one of the real knowledge on the part of your county staff and the providers in the community that are doing the work that can help sort of figure out how to build that flexibility into whatever you decide to do. That may not be an entirely satisfactory answer, but I think this is an area where this community can lead and can innovate and really add something to the national conversation around how landlord recruitment may impact goals around equity and the need for flexibility.
So thank you for that. We lost internet connection.
Yep.
So I'm going to say let's take a
Oh, no.
break. So we probably lost our participants.
Oh, no.
That's why now we're just seeing a picture of ourselves.
Recording in progress.
Oh, here we go.
It's connecting back. Well, let's take 5. And Chair Harrington, we'll start with you when we come back. If we can take 5 minutes, make sure our system's back online. And then I'm going to really try to push us into a conversation to move us through to the next steps. But thank you, Mark. Thank you, Hannah. Well, Hannah probably can't hear us. So let's take 5 minutes, come back at 5:31. I can't get on.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, really. You actually get to spend some serious time on one thing instead of 50 things. I mean, I've got a few, but
I think we have officially solved our technological problems. We are well over our time, so I'm going to try to push us into a direction that I hope will help us wrap up our conversation today. So I think there's really a couple pieces. And Chair Harrington, I'll come back to you after I try to set a little context for how we hope to move through the rest of this. I think there's a couple fundamental questions that I want us to kind of respond to as a group. One, you have the memo, we just had a conversation. Is there anything missing, or is there anything that we would want to not include as we think about moving forward? So fundamental kind of question. The other piece is just holding this idea. I think, Steve, you had talked about a regional mindset and just acknowledging that we may need to have a discussion to get to more clarity around what we mean by regionalization, but I don't want us to get bogged down in that conversation right now, right? I want us to have that regional mindset with the idea that this is a chance to kick off the next part of our process. So really today, it's hoping to come to agreement on that, when we think about the list that was provided by Focus Strategies, anything that we end up adding, do we agree that these things could contribute to regionalization? And then finally, ending our time with holding space for next steps. Does that work for folks? Like really just those fundamental questions, thinking about the list, and then we'll think about next steps. So moving forward, Chair Harrington, do you want to jump your things down now?
I thought what you were proposing, anyway, I'll just talk. So my real question is this. So I said, this presentation helped bring it to life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go and read it again. What I am wondering about is what are the next steps? Because what I'm thinking in my mind is we come back to this in a future meeting. I'm assuming we'll have the opportunity for our regional collection of staff to also talk about this, share some thoughts and ideas with us, and we'll have that committee's thoughts about what to do, both before that and informed by that.
Yep.
And then we'll go from there. But there wasn't a slide titled Next Steps
There's not a
for
slide,
me.
no, there's not a next step slide, but I think you described, I think what I was imagining is that what we're agreeing on today is the list of areas or recommendations, opportunities for deeper exploration, agreeing that that's the list that we'd like to more deeply explore for regionalization. My sense is what we're agreeing on is asking our, as you said, regional partners, our counties, Metro, et cetera, to come back with some responses and a proposed approach for how we could take what's on that list and think about how to regionalize it. So that's what I'm imagining will be the outcome of today, is just saying, is this the list that we agree would be valuable as a region? And then really relying on our counties, working with Metro and whomever else, to come back and actually propose, like, how would this look like? What would this look like going forward? What I want to start with, though, is, Jess and Vahid and Brianna, Kanoi, I did want to give you all an opportunity to just reflect back. You had an opportunity to kind of read through the memo. You don't have to offer, additional solutions, but I just wanted to create some space for counties just to reflect back. And then I want us to have those two fundamental questions. Is there anything that is missing that we would want to add to a regional deeper exploration? And is there anything that right now just feels like we're not ready for that? So I just want to give a little bit of space to be able to name that. So when we'll put all the items on a slide, and then we'll close out today with some conversation about next step. Ebony, did you want to jump in though first? You put your thing up. Really.
Yeah, it's because I didn't think you were finally going to get to the county reflections, but you
all
finally
right.
got there.
So
8 days later.
All right. Mercedes, do you have a comment? Because I did want to.
I was going to answer your question, what's missing?
Okay, let's come back to that. So, but I'll call on you first. So for our county partners, just wanted to offer a little bit of space for you all to reflect to the extent that you'd like to. And then certainly I think part of the next step is you all being able to come back with a deeper reflection on kind of what we end up landing on today and thinking about kind of what would that vision for regionalization look like. Jess?
Sure, I will start and invite my colleagues here also to join in. I mean, in short, we haven't had time. We are not here to offer reflections or feedback. We've circulated the memo with our staff. Certainly the staff leading our landlord liaison work and our programmatic work have had the opportunity to look at it, but we haven't had time to sit down and digest and prepare recommendations, even for Washington County, let alone in coordination with the other counties. We were busy on our annual report work, which everybody knows about. But I think at a quick high level, there's definitely a lot that resonates. There's a lot to work with. There's a lot of opportunity. And there's a lot of local nuance, too. There's a lot of conditions that, I mean, I think for us in Washington County, a theme that came up often is like many of these housing navigators, housing caseworkers, retention workers have just been hired. They're like in their job for 6 months or a year. These contracts are brand new. And so building that system and learning the skills and the works and the relationships is all new. And there's a lot of technical assistance and support that's needed. So this resonated in that experience of building a new system and opportunities to get to the yet, as Chair Harrington was referencing.
Yeah, thank you, Jess. Clackamas, Multnomah, any additional reflections? I can see everybody. We're just not seeing the blocks. Brianna?
Yeah, I can chime in a little bit, and thank you, Jess, for sharing that.
Brianna's got her help.
Just to kind of piggyback off of that, I just want to agree that we appreciate the work that's gone into creating this list of opportunities for us to explore. And while we're not quite in that phase of the work yet, we do look forward to being able to talk amongst ourselves as like the counties and be able to come to you all and say, hey, here's what's making sense with what we see. It's just, with time, it's been a little bit tricky to be able to do that. But just saying everything that, has been in there, it seems on the mark from what we've been hearing. It's not like we saw anything in there that was completely out of left field. So just appreciate the work that's gone into to gather that for the consideration of the counties and this group. So as we move forward, we're looking forward to coming back and being able to talk more about it, but just not too many examples to be able to give right now, unfortunately.
No, that's okay. Thanks, Brown. And Vahid, I saw your comment. Jess said it well. Kanoi, I didn't know if you or your young helper wanted to add anything. Okay. Giovanni, do you have a slide that just has everything on there? I think we put together, it has the list of the recommendations or the opportunities for exploration, I think is. See if we can share it live. But while we are doing that, so what I'd like to do is pull it up. Oh, you can't see it. There's the next up slide. Yeah, there is a next step. So, yeah, yes, there it is. So we could start here. The two questions I want folks to ask. We'll start with Mercedes, go to Ebony. Anything that you would like to add to this list, and then anything that you, as a group, feel like we want to take away. So let's start with Mercedes and then Ebony.
So I would love to know, so thinking about just the SHS providers who are in our pre-qualified pool, how many of them are already doing master leasing and how many of them are already doing their own property management? I think we also need to know who is already in each county doing general landlord education, like landlord tenant law, right? Who's doing that work? I really appreciated, I think, Chair Lewis's comments about getting into other jurisdictions, this idea of consolidating different subsidies. But I think at least under SHS, there are probably a couple under that there are, we are doing like not just Arla, right, under SHS. So I wonder if we can figure out how many different subsidy types is just SHS doing. And all that to say is, I think I would love to see one of these bullet points be like, what would a mission-based property management engagement look like? Because right now we're basically solely dependent on the private for-profit sector to do that body of work. It sounds like there are a couple of examples, a couple of organizations that have tried to build out that competency. What would it take to do that? To have a property management company that is just doing property management as their core body of work, but is mission-based in the sense of wanting to have some percentage of the units that they have under management that are in coordination with this kind of system.
So that's a lot of ads, so I'm going to try to, so I think there's the global question is what would the mission-based system look like? And then I think what I hear you, maybe to consolidate it to a bullet, it might say the evaluation of kind of the current state based on the pool of property managers, pool of community or communications and relationship building, how many subsidy types? Under SHS. So if I was to say, so what you would add a bullet, that's really an evaluation of the current state with those subheaders as the action, right? It would be a regional evaluation of that landscape. Is that fair? Yes. Okay. Ebony? I don't know if we can edit the slide in real time to say what I just said, but. It's recorded, right? It is recorded. Yeah, okay. Ebony?
Are you sure?
Please, I insist.
Yeah, one thing I would like for further exploration is, right now, it seems like we're throwing money at these landlords. This money is not working for us. I would like to see, and this is something I expressed to Mark, is this money going into a fund that, if landlords agree to keep a certain amount of units for these efforts, then, they have access to that fund. But that fund also would go to making sure that we're retaining tenants that might not be under SHS, and, creating systems to allow for, once that landlord asks for that rental assistance from that fund, there's a message that goes out, somebody like a housing specialist goes out, retention specialist goes out, and make sure that they navigate those barriers. I'm just tired of seeing wealthy landlords be wealthier, and the only reason they're getting wealthier is because they did not want to allow a formerly unhoused person into their property. And I would like to also see other tenants be able to stay in their properties. So, yeah.
So I'm going to try to say it, what I'm hearing into a bullet. So
Incentives working for
long-term retention?
Well, I mean, yeah, essentially.
But there was a different piece around actually a regional fund.
Yeah.
That kind of, I don't know, protect's not the right, what happens if you just like keep units into
They just, it just makes it to where they can act, yeah.
So it's a regional fund for unit retention and that includes the people that live there.
What if you just
Yes.
said
Because
building accountability into the incentive?
Well, right now, we're doing it one at a time. So if that person moves out, okay, like, that money is gone. If that person gets evicted, that money's gone. Whether if we have, okay, this person has promised 5% of their units to go towards these efforts, and that money stays in this pot, that is something that we can use long-term. That is something that can be replenished every year. It is our landlord incentive fund, and it also prevents the displacement of those currently in housing.
Okay. Steve?
Yeah, I think both points are good. I think talking more about SHS and what's going on, as well as looking at these other programs that folks, I'm sorry. Is
Thank
there?
you.
Sorry, is it there? Yes?
I think
Huh?
so.
Yeah, okay.
Is it there? Can you hear me?
I mean, it's the hardest thing in this whole thing, it really is, sorry. Because I really do think there are programs besides ARLA that are focusing on helping homeless folks get housing. And they have their own rules and regulations. They may not come with the suite of services that ARLA provides. we have the ability to involve that. I think, so I'm not saying Mercedes is wrong. I think we should do both. We should look deep and we should also look broad, because at the end of the day, we want landlords, housing providers, Mark calls them, and property managers, et cetera, to want to do business with us, to say that they want to be good citizens. They don't want to lose their shirt, but they want to be with a willing partners who will problem solve, if you will, and that the guarantee fund is there and the rent's being paid, they'll house folks. And the reason why I feel the first thing is this comprehensive communication plan, concurrent with coming back, is people don't know about all this. With the number of landlords that we have involved, it's a great start. There's a lot of landlords out there. There's a lot of owners, and they have properties oftentimes in all 3 counties. So it's just important for us to kind of think about that as well, I believe. But, I mean, there's lots of food for thought here, I believe.
Good, thank you.
Sorry.
Yep, jump in and then Nicole.
Okay, Nicole first.
You were very excited though, so Nicole, jump in, please.
I would be interested in maybe labeling more specifically the identified barriers that people are experiencing. When I think about a continuum of care and what that might look like and supportive housing services, I think that would also indicate ways to potentially partner with other systems of care like behavioral health care or addiction treatment services. And when we're looking at expanding agency leasing, you know, can agencies perhaps that provide addiction services or provide mental health care services, how can we be partnering better with them in order to support people with those greatest barriers?
I think Christina had named something similar, just really that deep understanding of root causes of barriers that, so it's both labeling and maybe communicating those identified barriers and root causes. Ebony?
I just also want to make sure that we have time to agree on some next steps and some goals that we can set here today for next month.
Yes. Well, if people stop adding things onto our list, then we'll
Stop
get there.
asking questions, dang. One recommendation that I had was getting a clear timeline of where we could see something by next month. So I don't know if that is something that Metro and the counties can work together on, like getting us a timeline by next month of where they see this going and maybe how long it would take for them to make a decision together. How long is it going to take to create a plan? All these things, and how long is it going to take to implement and funding? So any other ideas of what next steps would look like for this project?
Okay, let's come back to that in a second. Matt, are you talking about next steps or do you
Next
want?
steps.
Okay, so just, I think we've added a few things and we'll have to go back to the recording. I have some notes and we'll make sure that we consolidate on there. Is there anything that folks feel like needs to come off? Or are folks generally responsive, generally supportive of saying, we should be exploring all of these things? Is there anything that, I just want to know if folks want to name anything that's like, that seems like a no-go today? Okay. I was kind of asking that, hopefully nobody would say it. Okay. So what I heard, Ebony, for next steps, the counties are engaging, this is kind of a several-part conversation. I'd love to hear from you. Just the counties are engaging with their staff, right, to Jess's point, and with each other to digest and prepare a response and come back with ideas for how some of these things could be regionalized and when a more developed plan may emerge. But Matt, I want to come to you and edit what I just said or add. Love to hear from you.
Yeah, well, first off, I think that is, I think Ebony, as usual, just nailed it. But there's an aspect of it that I want to drill into just a little bit. One of the things that intrigues me about all these items is how incredibly interconnected they are. And so when you look at the time frame, it may well be, time frame, for example, for a portal, and that'll take whatever it takes. I mean, it shouldn't take much. And then under that, I think we should be flexible in our expectations that may in fact then trigger another time frame for another item. And to the extent that we can get better visibility around the interconnections and the dependencies of these things, I think the more practical and realistic it's going to be. And then the other thing that I would like to see as a next step, it's what I was talking about earlier in my comment and question to Mark, is that I think we also need to investigate how the structure that would support all this stuff, whether it's centralized or not. There are methodologies that I've seen and that can really help us. One of the things that often happens, there's been a lot of literature around this, is that in times of crisis, governments will basically retreat to the rules. And that's very understandable and so forth. But what we can do is to create structures that allow people to keep focused on the bottom line of performance, of helping people, and things of that sort. And this is a good illustration to me of when that becomes particularly important. So I would encourage Metro, however you may work it, working with the counties to let's start a parallel conversation about how this structure will work so that to the extent we consolidate, we're going to do so in such a way that we honor the kinds of issues that Chair Smith legitimately raised about making sure that this is something that will work in all the environments where it needs to work.
Thank you, Matt. Chair Harrington and then Liam.
Sure, okay. So looking at the clock and realizing time's going to be ending here in the meeting and really wanting to know, I'm going to read the report again and come prepared for December, entirely not knowing at this point what the major topics are for December. So I'm going to get something off my chest. I'm sorry, I'll start over. I'm going to go read the report again and come prepared for the possibility that we might be coming back to this topic at the next meeting in December. But I need to get something off of my chest. We have 6 goals with at least one, generally 2 recommendations. Good job. We've done the first goal under regional landlord recruitment. But what this committee wants to do is get an idea of what we're actually going to do, right? That's great. I'm all there. But I can't enter 2024 with no work plan for this committee. We have 6 goals. There's hiring going on at counties, at Metro, to get this work done. That's great. Thank you. Keep doing it, okay? But I also remember we're supposed to deliver something to the Oversight Committee. And they're supposed to deliver something to the Metro Council that includes our stuff. And I don't know when that's supposed to happen. Somehow, I love magic. I'm optimistic about magic, but you're asking me to have faith that magic's gonna happen. And I remember, whoa, wait a second, I'm actually appointed to this seat with TCPB, and so I'm supposed to do my part, and I don't have a clue right now what I'm supposed to do, and that scares the crap out of me. Welcome to my brain, it's just a little scary. But, so anyway, I'm hoping that maybe in the December meeting, I might get some of that clarity, because I really want 2024 to be a rocking year.
Well, let's have Liam be the responder to what you were going to say and maybe some reflection around kind of the work plan. And, I think that we've been getting updates on actions, but Liam, if you could talk to that, and then I want to kind of name what I think the next step is coming out of this meeting, so we can close out.
Yeah, 3 things. One, thank you for welcoming us to your brain. Nice to be here. Yes, you're right. We'll make some time in December to go through that, where we're at in the process. We don't have dates associated with the process, but we can dig deep on that and make sure that everybody understands exactly where we're at right now in the context of this goal, that goal, and the other goal. Yes, and we can actually send some materials out in advance too for you to take a look at and come back with your responses to Chair Harrington, so thank you. I do want to also highlight the point that Jess made earlier and Vahid backed up, which was counties want some time to digest the report, and so if they're able to come back in December with their thoughts, I think that's another deliverable that we're going to want to have given the next steps. And also, I'm looking forward to how you interpreted this, Ben, because I'm not clear on, I heard Ebony, I heard Matt about timeline, but with regard to what exactly?
Well, I'm going to jump in.
No. I'm just saying, are you in regards to what timeline I'm asking for? I'm asking for a timeline of when things are going to be digested, what is going to be the plan moving forward, when are the meetings happening, like an entire, I mean, we just want to be able to check in a reasonable amount of time and see where are we at in the work, and know that, like, if you guys need more folks to help with this process, that we're making sure we're pushing Metro to give you as many people as you can to make that stuff move forward. That goes for all the counties. But we just need to have some sort of idea of where you all are, or where you guys will be when it comes to getting to the end of this goal.
So I see cards where it's,
Yeah.
I just have a little tidbit I'd like to share with the
little
committee
tidbit, please.
before the committee adjourns.
well, can I try to reflect what the next steps are?
Yes,
And then
absolutely.
and come back and with tidbit. So I think what I would name as next steps, that the counties will engage with staff and each other to reflect and respond to the set of recommendations and come back to this group with a timeline for developing a plan. And I think it's really the actions that are going to support that timeline. To your point, it's not like we're going to have all this stuff done by this date, but rather here's kind of the steps that we're taking in towards that. Trying to understand and reflect on how these items intersect, some of Matt's points, how some of these structures could work, any constraints, like I think that's an important piece for counties to come back, and what contributes most to the understanding of regionalization. I know that's a conversation we're gonna have, but I think it's really important that counties are also understanding, like, are we at a place where we can start imagining this as regionalization as they're defining it? So,
Friendly amendment.
Friendly amendment.
I think as Chair Harrington said, when you say counties, it's county/metro.
yes, so the county/metro. Matt, did you want to add?
No, I'll hold it.
Okay.
For the sake of time.
Chair Harrington, tidbit?
Tidbit, Governor Brown issued an executive order around homelessness that has an expiration date, but they now have a dashboard, and it is orhomelessnessresponse.org, and they have a dashboard, first ever dashboard. As of yesterday, the data was reflective of August. On November 15th, the 15th of each month, Mike Savara will be updating it. So I'm hoping to see data through October 31st by that November 15th update. So just wanted to pass on orhomelessnessresponse.org.
Okay, thank you. So we'll capture some of these next steps. I mean, I think one of the points that's been made, and certainly I gave a little credence to this, is just the acknowledgement that we've had a lot of discussions that I think lend itself to a deeper conversation around regionalization versus consolidation versus coordination. We've used a lot of language today and through these conversations. So part of the challenge, I think, counties and Metro will have to help define what they're interpreting that, but I think that's really important for TCPB because I don't have a sense that we around the table are all actually talking about the same thing. So we're imagining things that would be great for the region, but what it actually means to regionalize, I think we'll have to have a conversation. So counties, we may need to bring you into a debrief planning conversation to kind of unpack what's here. There's a lot on the page. But we'll try to really honor the spirit of what folks are saying, is how do we continue this momentum, that regional mindset, building some trust, and really, making this something that's feasible, and doesn't drag out for forever, but also gives the necessary time that's necessary to do it well and do it right. Is that fair? Okay. Well, thanks for the extra 6 minutes. I'm gonna blame it on technical difficulties and starting late. So appreciate everybody doing the extra half hour. Great meeting. Much love. Have a wonderful night.
Thanks, Brad.